Welcome back. We are canning turkey broth today. I was able to get 2 turkey carcasses into the roaster oven 2 nights ago. So they have been going for, let's see, about 36 hours or so. And this is now perfect. It started all the way full and now it is down about 3-4 inches. So the plan for today is we are going to can up this turkey broth, and I wanted to start by kind of talking through my setup and what I do to make it the most convenient and easy for me to can the turkey stock. So I have out 18 pint jars, and these are regular mouth. I prefer regular mouth for broth because you can fit more in the canner and you don't need to like get your hand in there or anything in there to try to clean it as much as if you had like beans or something. So I like to use these. I set all of my jars up next to my sink, and in a little bit we will get some really hot water in them. They are already really clean, so all we need to do is heat them up. Now the broth I did unplug about 30 minutes ago because I didn't want it to be so hot that I could burn myself, because that's just no fun. And I also got out all of the supplies, which I now need to set up in the way that I prefer. So the canner's out. I need to get some I need to get some water in the canner, and I also like to put some vinegar in it. So let's do that. Let's get the vinegar in the canner. And the reason that I use vinegar is because it just prevents it from having that white like coloring on the outside. It washes off, but then you don't have to if you put vinegar in it. So got that. And of course, when you're pressure canning, you want to make sure to have a few quarts of water in the bottom, not enough to cover the jars like water bath canning. So we're going to get some water in this pot. Let's get the water in all these jars, and then we will set up the rest of the way. And I'm using very hot water, as hot as it comes out of my sink, which is about 130 degrees. It doesn't matter what temperature, just really hot is what you want to use. And I usually spill when I do this, and that's totally fine. We'll just clean it up. If you don't like how crazy that is, you could just put your jars under the sink. I just usually don't. Okay, now that we have our jars filled, I will bring you in to show you this. I haven't forgotten. I'll show you once I have the whole setup. That way you can see how it's set up. I like to have this a little bit back. And I do have some water down here because I, of course, spilled it everywhere, which is how it usually happens, which is fine. I used to have a longer hose on my sink until I could just go right over them and it was completely fine. Now this one's a lot shorter than the old one. So I have this box that I brought the turkey carcass home from Thanksgiving. I had one in my freezer too, but I'm going to use this to get all of the scraps in as we take them out of the broth, which we'll do in a little bit. And then I like to have, I usually don't have a box. Usually it's just a roaster pan, but this is a reusable or a disposable roaster pan. It was different this year. All right, so I like to have those next to each other so I can just, you know, put it in there. And I, of course, have my complete guide to home canning. I need to get this turned to the broth page, which is on 5-7. And I get the recipe out every single time I can, because when you're canning, you want to make sure that you're using a safe and trusted, tested recipe. So I have this out. We are good to go. We don't need this quite yet. I know we're doing 1-inch headspace. This is going to help me with the timing though. So it says we need to process for 20 minutes, and then we are at mile high, so that is 15 pounds of pressure. Let's get everything else out. So this is the space that I like to work with, and I've got my jars here, my broth here, which I will pull the broth towards me. Now I need to get everything else set up here that I like. So I have everything out already. We're going to grab our fat separator. That'll go here. We also need our spoon, and I like this canning spoon a lot because it like hooks on the edges of pots. Not this one, but a lot of pots. And then, let's see here. We have our jar lifter ready because these are going to be hot and I need to get them into the canner. Tongs so I can get all of the big pieces out. A strainer so that we can strain the broth. And a funnel so we can get the broth in the jars. So let's see here. These are all going to be used here. And then we need to grab rings, so I got out exactly how many rings I needed. Got them. It's a trick trying to get them all at the same time. And actually, I think I'm going to put the rings over here. There's a lot of prep work when it comes to canning. And then the last thing that I need is the lids. So we got the lids here, and then I have these gloves, which I'm going to need, but not yet, so we will put them here. This is the first time I'm canning on this burner. On the other stove, I had a little tiny burner there, so that'll be cool. And we need that. All right, a lot of prep, but I think we are ready to get started. Let me show you the entire setup. Okay, here's our setup. We have the container for the scraps. Here's the broth, and I did fill this all the way up, and now it's come down about that much over the last 2 days. I did fill it a little bit high, so if I would have filled it less, I probably wouldn't have needed 2 days, but we're good now. I've tasted it. I like it. I just added a little bit of salt. That's all I put in there. No veggie scraps or anything. And then from my perspective, here's what we've got. So I have all my jars, and then I have my rings. The first thing I'm gonna do is take all of the bones out that I can, and then we will have the strainer not right here anymore, and then our setup will be all ready for us to just have the fat separator and start jarring. And then over here, here's about how much water I have in there, and we need to get this turned on. So let's see. And I think I'm just gonna do about medium or so right now, and then we will have to turn it up when we start drying them up. So let's get started. All right, first thing I'm gonna do, roll up the sleeves, and then we are going to start taking some of these carcass pieces out, just because I find that it's easier to get as much out before I get started as I can. And some of this is meat that's been cooking for a few days. It's fine, I'm just going to put any of the meat in there as well. I do want to let as much of the broth drip off as I can, because that's the good part. I don't have an anti-fatigue mat on this side. I'm like, should I bring one over? But then I need it in both spots. This is not my normal side for cooking, but this is the side that I do my canning in. Okay, we have a decent amount of this out. What I think I'm going to do is start getting some broth in the fat separator, because that takes a minute. So that's gonna stay there. Let's see here. I need to get, probably need to get like a paper towel or something. Okay, have you seen this trick? All you have to do is put your strainer in, and then you have strained broth. You do not need, spilled it already. You do not need to strain it through the sieve. Okay, that is going to sit and get the fat to the top. In the meantime, I'll set this down, and we will continue on getting out as much of this stuff as we can. Whoa, splash. Even with getting everything set up, I did completely miss a step. So we need to get a little bowl, need to get some vinegar in it, and then I have a paper towel that I could dip in the vinegar to wipe the rims, because we want to cut the grease on the rims so that everything seals well. Okay, it's time to fill the first jar. I'm going to dump out the water and then take out the stopper. And now, I don't know if you can see that, but our fat, we have a fat line up on top, and there's no fat in here. So that's great. We're going to pour it until we get to the bottom part of the rim, which is 1 inch. Beautiful. And I don't think we got any on it, but just in case, put the vinegar there and put this there. I want to make sure to not put that vinegar on my counter if I can help it, because we don't want to etch the counter. Let's get these lids out. 1 brand new lid going on, and 1 ring. It's hot. And then into the jar, And then into the canner it goes. One down, a bunch to go. You know what? We do not need the funnel. That's a little low. Here we go again. Oh, this is a step I forget a lot of times. Put the stopper back in before you fill your jar. Not jar. Before you fill the fat separator. Here's that little line at the top of the fat, and that line will just grow as we continue to do this because we will get more and more fat in there. Now in a perfect groove, I would have been putting the stopper on and getting the broth in here before finishing this one. We'll get there though. And here's what it's looking like in the canner. Okay, we have the groove back. It took me a second, but we've got it. Okay, so what we're gonna do this the quickest way, is pour 2 jars at once, and we will fill them both up. That's hot. My arm's a little tired from having it held up, taking all the stuff out of the broth, bones and such. Okay, there's 1. And there's 2, and then here's how we get the flow going. So I am going to fill the fat separator before I put the lids and rings on. So that way the fat separator can be sitting there separating the fat while I am finishing the steps, and then they'll be ready for me. And I've been just keeping the strainer just with the handle up and then putting this in it, and we have more space, so we're doing good. Next, I take this, wipe both rims, put lids on both, put rings on both, and get them both in the canner one by one. And now it's been long enough that that's been sitting, so we can get going again. And then I think at this point I need to tip this up. Oh, I forgot to put the spout on. That's all right. There we go. Push that back down. we could actually get, how many was that, 9, 10 on the bottom, so I could do 10 on the top too. I don't think we're going to have enough broth to do 10, but I'll get out more jars if I need to. I have 3 jars left out, and we're at the bottom of the broth, so I'm going to actually pour it through the strainer this way and hope that I don't spill it. Okay, I think that's all we're going to be able to get. Here is what we have in the fat separator. Here's what we have in the fat separator. So you can see this line right here. That's where down below is the broth and up top is the fat. So I don't want to put this into a jar. We also don't have enough for a full jar. We have 3/4 of a cup. So I'm going to get this broth that's the 3/4 of a cup in just a jar, put it in the fridge, or maybe I'll put it in the freezer, and then we'll use the fat for something else, or I'll discard it. I don't know exactly what to do with the fat other than make a roux, which I don't need right now. Okay, we're on to the next step. We need to get the lid on the canner, and I'm going to turn it so that the steam isn't going into my microwave, and then I'm going to turn this up to high. And what we need to do now is wait for it to start venting out of this little vent pipe right here, and then we will set a timer for 10 minutes, and once we have the 10-minute timer go off, we will put the weight on. Now in the meantime, I have quite a bit of stuff to clean up, so we will get all this stuff cleaned up while the canner's going. All right, the timer went off and this valve has popped up. I'm going to get, oh, I always freak out about that. I got the weight on. Now we're waiting for this to get to 15 pounds of pressure, and then once it gets to 15 pounds of pressure, we will start the timer for 20 minutes, and then after that 20 minutes is over, I will just turn the heat off and we will just let it come down naturally all the way to 0 pounds, and then we will take the jars out. The canner finished processing and it's completely come down and the vent has come out, so I'm going to take off the weight, and then I'm going to put on these funny looking gloves because these are going to prevent me from being burned from the steam. So what we need to do is take the lid and just prop it up a little bit, and I'm going to let the steam come out of this for a little bit. That way it doesn't have all the steam rush out at once and drastically change the temperature. So we're going to give that just a couple seconds, and then we will get the jars out. All right, this is my first time getting the jars out on this side. Let's see how this goes. That's kind of interesting. I think this is gonna go very well. And now my jars aren't in the way because I like to do everything on that side. And the whole catalyst for doing it on the other side is that the stove is new. These look beautiful. They're a little cloudy, but I know that it tastes delicious. A lot of times my broth comes out a little bit too diluted, so I wanted to make sure it wasn't diluted this time. And I had some meat in with the bone, so I think that's probably a little bit why it's cloudy. It's a happy canning song. Oh, my shoulder. we did it, and there's the turkey broth for the year. I don't think this is going to be enough to get me through the year. I think I'm going to have to figure something else out because I switched between turkey and pork broth, and I do have some bones that I could make pork broth with, but I think throughout the year I'm going to have to figure out something else too. So maybe we'll make chicken or beef for the first time. I've only ever made pork and turkey broth, which is kind of funny because those are not the most common flavors. So anyways, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're new here and haven't yet, please subscribe. I'd love to see you. If you're interested in seeing how we canned up the turkey broth and what it looked like last year, I will pop that here. And if you're interested in seeing some fun festivities of this year, I will pop something here. Thanks so much for being here. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.